Oh yeah, we got to overturn.
You're listening to the E-Men, inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. 39 volumes down now, including tonight's of the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. Like I said, it was the first miniseries I ever created here on the podcast, and it's become a backbone of the show. Welcome back, of course. It's now episode 285 of the Mike the New Haven podcast, specifically as we are on the march to episode 300, which will hit early next year, 2024. You haven't checked out the previous episode, of course. That was last Friday with Seth Garr, volume 38 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. Did 15 of his 20 years in the ESU, specifically in Two Truck in Harlem. He's still out, of course, in law enforcement as a trooper with the New Hampshire State Police. There's a lot of peer support, which is great stuff. We talked about it. Sorry about the cancellation this last Tuesday. That was supposed to be volume 1 of the Best of the Bravest Nationwide edition. We were supposed to have Seaside Heights, New Jersey Fire Chief James Samarelli, but unfortunately he got called into work, so that threw things for a loop. But we're back tonight with my guest who I'll introduce momentarily, but of course, a couple of sponsors to go through. First things first, of course, first sponsor for the program is me. It's MC Media Editing Services, which is my consulting company.
Need advice on how to start your podcast? Frustrated with the editing process? Can't find a voiceover guy? Hi, I'm Mike Colón, and I'm here to help. I'm the owner and founder of MC Media Editing Services, your premier consulting company for all things media, where I can offer you consulting advice on how to get started, and once you get started, editing, as well as voiceover work, all for a very reasonable price. If you want to reach me, you can contact me at 917-781-6189 or the email that you see listed here. I'm always available, and I'm always willing to help. Again, 917-781-6189. Why go to some giant consulting firm that's going to charge you an arm and a leg when you can just come to me? If you want to be stress-free, the way to go is to call MC. MC Media Editing Services, your premier consulting company.
And if you're a New York Rangers fan, you get a special discount now, of course, to my man, Billy Ryan.
The Mike the New Haven podcast is proudly sponsored and supported by the Ryan Investigative Group. If you need an elite PI, look no further than the elite Ryan Investigative Group, which is run by retired NYPD Detective Bill Ryan, a 20-year veteran of the department who served the majority of his career in the Detective Bureau, most notably in the Arson and Explosion Squad. So if you need a PI to handle anything from fraud, legal services, and anything else that you might require, contact Bill at 347-417-1610. Again, 347-417-1610. Reach him at his website or the email that you see here. Again, if you need a PI, look no further than Bill Ryan and the Ryan Investigative Group, a proud supporter and sponsor of the Mike the New Haven podcast.
Thank you to Billy, of course, and shout out to in the live chat thus far, Captain Chaos, John Costello, QC Beast, Patty Pogan, of course, and Michelina Sereno. Good to see you all, and all who else, and everyone else, I should say, who will be tuning in tonight. All right, my next guest wore two very unique hats as a member of the New York City Police Department. One is an emergency service unit cop, and two is a member of the Joint Terrorism Task Force. Before all that, he came on the job in 1994 and started out, as they all do, in patrol, specifically in the 6-2 precinct in Fort Cannoli, as he jokingly referred to it, Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. It'd be in 1999 that he'd get into ESU, and he'd work there until 2008, where from there, he went to the JTTF, as I mentioned earlier, working most notably as a hazmat team leader, the first non-FBI agent to ever hold that distinction, which is pretty cool, and we'll touch on that tonight. And that for this volume 39 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit is a man I've been trying to get for a long time, and finally we're collaborating. That's one, Vince Manco. Vince, good to see you. Welcome. How are you?
Doing good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here, and hello to Joe Maliga from Rochester, New York, of course, retired correctional officer, and Jerry Barbario, Franco Barbario's brother. He's watching via LinkedIn. Good to see you, Jerry. Happy to see you this evening, and all of you, of course, who are tuning in. So before I get to everything involving the 27-year odyssey that was the NYPD, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn.
All right, Bay Ridge kid. The civil service neighborhoods often existed back then in a lot of different places. Was yours the kind of neighborhood that had a lot of cops and firemen, or not really?
I lived in the confines of the 6-8, and every time I saw a cop car go by, I so bad wanted to be sitting in that, not in the back of the car, in the front of the car.
There you go. At least you had those aspirations, positive aspirations. Hi to Darren Phillips, and Steve Stephanakis, of course, as we predicted, is showing up, and he says, here we go. Good to see you.
Oh, boy. He's on.
He's on. And shout out to Joe Maliga's better half, Dawn. She's watching too. Appreciate that. So, specifically, of course, getting on that time, you got three different police departments that are in existence in New York City. There's housing, there's transit, and people came to enjoy as that come before housing and transit if they were assigned there. But the preferred choice, and this is no disrespect to either agency, is the NYPD. So you get on in 1994, right before that merger, and this is an interesting time to get onto the job because Bratton had just come in and the tide was turning. A lot of these hot spots, a lot of these problem neighborhoods were being cleaned up thanks to the broken window style of policing. So for 6-2, in the 6-2 precinct in Bensonhurst at that time, was it a high crime area, low crime, somewhere in the middle?
I would say it was a low crime area,
Mhm.
as they would call it. Is it A, B, and C house? I would say we were probably a D house. It was quiet.
Hmm.
There wasn't much going on.
Hmm. Still, there's an opportunity to learn. Of course, you got senior guys and gals there who can teach you. So coming on 94, 95, that first year, NSUs are gone by this point. You have an FTO instead. Who was your FTO? What do you most remember? What are some of the biggest lessons that stick out from your early time frame?
My FTU sergeant was Sergeant Imbergio. He was an old time sergeant, really, really great guy. Taught us the ropes. Taught us how not to get in trouble, what can get you in trouble, especially in the slow command. It's very easy to get in trouble,
Mhm.
and we learned pretty quick. I mean, he was a good sergeant. We really had a good bunch of guys.
Hmm. Now, we talked about it off the air. I don't know the exact history, and I guess we can dive into it here. Why do they call it Fort Cannoli?
Well, it's Bensonhurst. It's in a majorly Italian area. It's got numerous nicknames: Fort Hairspray, Fort Cannoli. It was mostly an Italian area,
All
so
right.
that's where the nickname came from.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So, as far as the climate in the 90s, mid 90s, we're talking about, even if it's a low crime area, you run into your fair share of what you call, or what you would describe as common calls. What are some of the more interesting encounters, if any, or good arrests that you were able to make from that time period?
I was actually pretty active. I left being a new cop. We were put on the scooter chart where we did day tours and 4 to 12s, and an opening came up for the midnights. And me and my partner volunteered for the midnights because we always saw the midnights always had collars. Every time midnights were rocking and rolling, we volunteered for it, and I became pretty active. I was probably number two in the squad. On midnights with collars.
And if you want to go somewhere, anywhere, it doesn't even have to be ESU, which is where you ended up first. What's the key to getting noticed by the brass in a positive way? Being an active cop. So I'll ask you, and there is something I do want to touch on that occurred in Bensonhurst in the mid 90s, or he was a resident of Bensonhurst in the mid 90s. When did you start thinking of, maybe I want to go to emergency, I want to put in for any kind of specialized unit?
Well, dealing with the emergency service unit on the midnight with the pin jobs and the EDP jobs and the barricades, um, kind of like that kind of work. Seeing what they were doing, pulling up, it was like they would pull up and rope up their chest and be Superman uniform, and underneath it was like amazing, And I always thought I'd love to do that, and I really tried and got a chance.
There you go. I did want to ask you about this because he was a Bensonhurst guy and he was a Brooklyn cop. Tony Musumillo got killed tragically in May of 1998, serving a warrant. I don't know if you knew him at all. I think he worked in the 6'7" as a cop, 6'2", in that relatively the same area. So, even if you didn't know him, what do you remember from that time where listen, it hits hard no matter the borough, but it's one of your guys. It's a Brooklyn guy who was killed in the line of duty and by all accounts, a great guy.
I remember the incident. I did not know him, but one cop shooting that really did. I remember really a lot was Ray Cannon.
Oh,
We were working a 4 to 12, and we actually got sent over to the hospital to pick up his. They wanted his vest, his shirt, and his badge to One Police Plaza, and we had to transport it. And that was really not fun.
oh yeah.
That was not fun. That was a bad one. Yeah.
That sticks with you. For those, and most of you in the audience do know, there's some of you that don't, however, and most of you in the live chat are NYPD, so you remember this. But for those that don't, Ray Cannon was a young police officer. He had just gotten married literally 2 months before. And in December of 1994, his anniversary is coming up. He responds to a reported robbery at a bicycle shop. He goes in, and without getting into too much disturbing detail, there's 3 robbers. One of them emerges from the counter and starts shooting at him and his partner. Ray was struck in the face. He was removed to a hospital where, unfortunately, he died from his injuries. He was only 26 years old, and he was one of 3 or 4 officers, I believe 4, to be killed in line of duty in 1994. Very tragic case. Very tragic case. So, Arhelio Alonso, shout out to you. Of course, you're watching via LinkedIn. I appreciate you being there. Getting to emergency now. It's the spring of 1999 when you're able to get into the STS. Now here's 6 months to prove yourself. A lot of people look back on this specific time frame, and of course, it's hard in the moment, but you're glad you're able to do it in hindsight because it proves what you're made of in the end. So from that 6-month period in the STS, what most stands out? What were some of the fondest memories you have from that period, learning how to be an E-man?
Well, one thing I want to just tell you is our class was actually 7 months. They kept a lot of the guys back to become EMTs.
Mm-hmm.
A good portion of us were EMTs already, I being an EMT back from 1989. So we were a 7-month class. The STS school, camaraderie, teamwork, the constant pounding in your head of teamwork, the constant push by the instructors, the constant, that we are the last resort. That's what really stuck in my head for every, forever. That, you never say no to a cop, always try to do whatever you can and never ever say no. That was the biggest thing.
And it's interesting once you emerge from the STS because you've learned a lot. You don't know everything. Of course, you have a long way to go before you can even feel comfortable as an E-man or E-woman. But it's a two-pronged thing where on one hand, you want to keep your mouth shut and absorb as much as you can. But on the other hand, you're eager to prove that you belong and you want to prove that you can measure up, especially when you go to the truck and there's a lot of senior guys there or gals. So for you, balancing that and not psyching yourself out and staying in the moment and making sure that you learned what you needed to, but also took initiative when appropriate to show that you did belong. How did you manage that in that first year?
Well, they tell you basically to keep your mouth shut, just do what you're told, try and absorb and be a sponge and just absorb as much stuff as you can and just learn from the senior guys. And that's basically it.
So you get the 6 truck originally in 1999. That's where you would spend the first year and a half or so. So, tell me about first of all, the geography of 6 truck, where it covers, and what were some of the common jobs responsible? I think this is Coney Island, if I'm not mistaken.
6 truck was Bay Ridge, the
Okay,
6-8 operation that turned out of.
Okay.
6 truck covered 6-8, 6-2, 7-2, 7-6, 7-8, 6-0, and 6-1. So we had a lot of highways, bridge jobs, pin jobs, a lot of EDP jobs. We're in the Coney Island a lot, and we backed up 7 truck a lot also with their perp jobs.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's one job that stands out in particular, and that's August of 2000. I'll get to that momentarily. But before that, prior to that, any other jobs of note that you can recall?
In Brooklyn, we had a lot of pin jobs. That was we had gotten in there. My partner was Pete Whalen at the time, and we were the new guys, and we were hearing all the stories about the pin job program and how it started in 6 truck, and make sure that tool's always working. And we did a lot of pin jobs, a lot. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, especially, being, as you said, being so close to highways. I believe 10 truck has that too, where they're very close to the highway. So as a result, they get their fair share as well.
Yeah.
Yep. There's a lot of that work to go around. And it's, as Maddie Lawrence once told me when she was on the show, it's not that you're taking the person out of the car. With those tools, you're taking the car off the person. So looking at it that way, I mean, listen, there's been some great rescues that have been able to be made as a result.
One job that does stand out, though, I was with a very senior man, Cliff Massab, and we responded to a jumper on a Verrazano Bridge, and I was only out 2-3 months, and it was a 4 to 12, and this is when ESU still had highway Staten Island Truck 5.
Yep,
was Hesse.
Mm-hmm.
It was called Hesse, and we got to the bridge, and it was a confirmed jumper, and Cliff said, I'm going to go out there, tie me in, and I was nervous, and I did it. And we requested more trucks. We requested the truck to come and truck 5 to come. And truck 5 pulled up, and there was a highway sergeant driving it. And they got out, and he's like, "What do you need?" And I'm like, "We need the ESU guys." He's like, "No, they're not covering tonight." And it was weird. It was pretty weird. But that was one job that stood out in 6 truck.
They were called Highway Emergency Squad Staten Island, or HESI, as you said. And that,
Hesse.
yeah, that
Yep.
was an odd one. Yeah, I don't
Yep.
think it wasn't until like the early aughts, early 2000s, that they became entirely separate from Highway. But people forget, yeah, they were merged for a while at the hip.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that was an interesting dynamic. I mean, they always called it Five Truck, nevertheless, but still, yeah, that was a little bit of an interesting dynamic they had going on there. So, like we said, this job stands out. August 12th, 2000. And we were talking about it off the air. I'll ask you about it on the air. I got Joe Guerra's perspective last year, of course, when he came on and talked about it at length. But you were there for that shootout in which 4 members of emergency were shot by an EDP, I believe, with the shotgun. And that was a job, as I remember telling Joe and Joe Dolan when he was on for Tales from the Boom Room. Nobody won. In the end, neither the family, neither the gunman, obviously, or you guys in ESU won that day. It was tragic all around. But that job, from your perspective, take me through August 12th, 2000, and that shootout in Brooklyn.
I was coming in for 4 to 12, and I always had 10-10 wins on because I wanted to know the traffic-wise coming from Long Island to Brooklyn. And they were saying about a big standoff in Brooklyn, and this is going on, that's going on. So I got to the truck, and I noticed that all the vehicles were out. And I have to give big kudos to Joe Dolan. Joe Dolan saved my butt that night, and me and him partnered up that night, and we were called to the scene. We got there. It was hectic. There was, I believe, 5 big trucks on Ocean Parkway, completely depleted. Pete McGovern was the truck chauffeur, and he was completely overwhelmed. There was so much equipment out, so many guns were out. And Captain Yee, when we pulled up, Captain Yee had told us to give him a hand and get stuff and shuffle stuff around and stuff like that. The teams were getting ready to make entry, and Joe Dolan says to me, he goes, "Kid," he goes, "put your vest on, get your helmet on, get ready." And we jumped in the back of 6 trucks, RMI truck, the robot truck that was empty. And we just started to hear it on TAC G on the radio. I heard it, make an entry, and heard the flashbangs going off, and clear, clear, clear. And then they're saying that the perp is not there, and they started doing backyard searches, and then that was it. It sounded like the 4th of July. There was just shots going off like crazy. And then over TAC G, we heard someone calling for help, and Joe Dolan just grabbed me. And we jumped out of that truck, and it was pouring. And we ran down the block. I tell you, I'm getting chills just talking about it. And we ran down the block, and you heard the gunfire. And believe it or not, we were running down the block that was the down block for the level 4 mobilization that was called. Now, level 4 mobilization is that's a lot of cops. That's a serious amount of cops. And this was the down block. And all these cops were running at us to get away from what was going on. And we're running in. And we got to this house. And I'll never forget it. It had a down driveway. And we hid behind a car, and the shots were coming through the house. And, windows were breaking. And Joe just grabbed me, and we went down the driveway. And Joe just reached into this open door and pulled out Joe Guerra. Just pulled him out like he knew. I didn't know what I was doing. Thank God for Joe Dolan. And he pulled him out, and I went in DMT mode. And I saw this guy shot in the nose, the eye, the cheek, the jaw, the neck. And I just put my arm under his head, and I just started pulling, teeth, tongue, lip out of his mouth to get him to, he was gurgling, to get him to breathe. And we're trying to drag him up the driveway. And there are rounds whizzing by. They're still engaging this guy in the backyard. This is still an active gunfight. And we come out with Joe, and it was so hard to hold on to him with the blood. It was like oil. And we're running with him, and we got up the street, and we're running down the street with him. And I believe Dave Ko jumped in behind me. Dave was a PA. And believe it or not, Commissioner Joe Dunn also jumped in on the stack and helped carry him. And as we were running down the block, I can never forget, but the Peacekeeper, the APC, the tracked vehicle, came down the block. and it almost killed us because Johnny Elric was driving it. I saw him out the hatch, and he came up the block, and we all just cringed over. And I remember it hitting my holster. That's how close it was. We got to the ambulance, and Joe was finally breathing. I got him breathing, and we got him to the ambulance, and the paramedics were in the bus, and they would not come out. They were petrified of coming out. And I don't know if it was somebody behind me. It was either Joe Dunn or I can't remember who it was. Pulled off somebody's helmet and bashed open the back window of the bus. And we opened up the door, and we put Joe in. Dave Ko jumped in. I believe Dave Ko started the line because the paramedics were gone. The paramedics just took off. So it was an empty bus. I went over the air. I told the dispatcher, we just put an MOS in the bus. I said, it's Adam 6-4 to 12 Central. We got numerous MOS shot here, and we're going to need more buses, and we need help. And Joe Dolan grabbed me again. He goes, come on, we're going back in. And we went down that same driveway again. And Joe said, grab that bunker. And that's when it hit me. I picked up Joe Guerra's bunker. I saw his handgun on the ground. I picked up Joe's bunker, and there was blood on the viewport, and you could see light coming through the side. And that's when it really, my knee started shaking. That's when it really hit me. And I just took my finger, I cleared the viewport, I grabbed my handgun, and we just went. And the shooting had stopped. And Joe's like, listen, we're doing secondaries. And I just followed his lead. I thank God for him. And we went through the entire house. We went in the backyard. The perp was down. The guy's name was Arthur Alaloof. That was the perp. Went in the backyard, saw him, and just started seeing all the guys coming out of the backyard. Richie Miller, Ocasio came out. He was hit. And it was just like, we were all like, just patting each other and just, how do we make it out of this? It was just something that I was never involved in my life. And it's to this day, I still like it happened yesterday. It was unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Thanks for telling that story. I know it's not easy to relive. I mean, these are difficult memories, but man, and again, it's one of those jobs where, as I mentioned earlier, nobody won, because even though, listen, the family that called the police, that's not what they wanted to have happen to their son. Obviously, you guys were left with no choice when he's firing at you. Yep. But it's unfortunate for them. It's obviously unfortunate for you guys. But on the police side, one thing that is positive, it's a miracle that no police officers, especially Joe, were killed that day. The fact that he was able to survive that, finish out his career, and he's still going strong now, is amazing. You know what?
God bless everyone involved in that job.
Yeah, no, you took the words right out of my mouth. That was a job where it's truly, you look back and say, wow, how did nobody get killed there? On the police side.
I still can't believe it. I still can't believe it.
Thank goodness that Joe was able to survive that and come back. Even though, listen, he wasn't able to finish his career in the way that he wanted to, better that way than him going to an early grave. So shout out to Joe, and shout out to you and everybody, like you said, that was there at that job. And I'll ask you, here you are, you only got a year in ESU when this happens, just a year and change. Psychologically, what does that do to you? Because you had just gotten there.
Psychologically, it was a lot, because the next, we got back to the truck that night really, really late and cleaned up, and we were a mess. I was covered in blood. Joe Dolan was covered in blood. We didn't know if we were shot. I mean, your adrenaline was pumping. It was such chaotic a mess. And we got back to the truck, and we all cleaned up, and we went home, and I came back in the next day, and that's when things changed. A lot of the senior guys, look down on the new guys as, you're a new guy, you have nothing to say. And there was a guy in 6 truck, Tommy Abansky, who very, very, very well respected. And that night, I came in for the 4 to 12 the next night. He goes, kid, you come with me. We're going to the hospital. I'm like, you got it. I go, where are we going? He goes, we're going to see Joe Guerra. Now, I didn't know Joe. I didn't know Joe at all. And we went to the hospital, and we walked in and saw all the tubes in his mouth, and, laying there. And one thing it's kind of weird is I walked up to him, and I said, hey, buddy, how are you? And he looked up, he tried to look up, and he goes, he knew the voice. And I went down to give him a hug, and he goes, "You're Vinny." And I went, "Yeah, Joe, it's me." And I just lost it. I just started crying. It was so emotional to see, that he made it, and it's unbelievable, man. I was so proud to see that this guy made it, and he wasn't, shot, killed, and I'm lost for words. I don't know.
And it's
But
what's funny, on a more lighthearted note with that job, is that Astor wheeling Joe in, and he told me this story himself. He was cracking jokes at one point because they were
yeah,
trying to
yeah,
put something in his
yeah,
rear area. He's like, "I'm not shot there." So
yeah.
even in something as chaotic as this, where his life is hanging in the balance, the guy was cracking jokes. I mean, again, warrior, absolute warrior.
But a great thing to hear from like a guy like Tommy Abansky. He said to me, he goes, "Kid," he goes, "you did a great job." He goes, "Be very proud of it."
Mhm.
He goes, "Be proud of it." He goes, "Don't feel bad." He goes, "You did a great job." He goes, "You're becoming an E-man," and that meant a lot. That
I'm
meant a
sure.
lot.
I'm
Yep.
sure. Listen, the way you were able to cite that, you quoted him word for word. It's 23 years later. I know it means a lot to you.
Yep.
How could it not? Especially coming from a senior guy. So, not too long after that, you go from 6 to 10 in March of 2001. What prompted the transfer? Was it that job, or were you thinking about it anyway? Was it a commute thing?
It was. We got assigned to the apprehension team at Fort Totten, and the commute was unbelievable from Long Island to Fort Totten.
Mhm.
And my wonderful partner Pete Whalen did the transfer for me. And yeah, it was a good move. I had to. The commute was killing me, and I'm actually very happy I did it. 10 truck was really, really a great move. A lot of great people, Stephanie, especially Stephanakis. It was a good move. I really enjoyed it.
So, at this time in 10, you had a good nucleus of people. I don't know what shift you were working. I don't know if it was the midnights, the days, or the 4 to 12s, but Steph's there, Richie Winwood's there, Nina
Yeah,
Rosato, Kenny Schnetzler. Of course, you got Tom Langone and Paul
yeah.
Talty and Glenn
Paul
Klein. So, a lot
Tolton.
of great people. So, working there just those pre 9/11 months, March to August, getting used to a new truck. Tell me about, some of the early jobs that stand out from that time period in 10.
10 truck was very similar to 6 truck. A lot of pin jobs,
Mm,
and
that's right.
again, 10 truck had a lot of senior guys, a lot of senior guys. And you come there, I think 10 truck actually had like coffee mugs and seats assigned to people. That's how senior it was. And it's kind of funny. But yeah, pin jobs galore. Pin jobs were and EDPs, a lot of EDP jobs in 10 truck.
Mm. Oh yeah, so as we talked about earlier, right by the highway. And then you got Shea Stadium in your backyard there at the time, now it's Citi Field, but it's right down the street from 10. So, that presents some interesting details from time to time as well. Now, as we were talking about off the air, 6 months later comes that whirlwind. And, any of the big jobs that ESU had prior were dwarfed by what happened here, of course, in New York. And you were away at the time. You had been on vacation. You came back the Friday after to just this awful, awful scene. And then you
Yep.
learn that 14 guys are missing and 2 of them are from your truck. So tell me about that first day back when you come back from vacation and you get the brief on what happened. I mean, you knew what happened, but the full extent of it.
I had flown into LaGuardia, and I went right from the airport to the truck. Just got dressed and was driven down to the site and completely overwhelmed, completely not knowing where you were. Like a war zone. All your landmarks were gone, and it was just disaster.
Mm.
Just disaster.
Yeah, I can imagine. I always like to focus on the positives. And I mean, as I've said many times before, we know how these gentlemen died, but it's not about that. It's about how they lived. I don't know how much interaction you had with Tommy and Paul, if at all. But if there were any interactions of note that you remember, tell me about, breaking bread with those guys.
Well, Tommy was my instructor in SDS, and Paul Tolte was my teammate in SDS.
Mm.
So I knew both of them very well, and it was horrendous coming back and hearing that they were missing. We wouldn't say they were dead,
Right.
until they were found. And the one night that we were down there, it was a 4 to 12, and Captain Yee was down at the site the night that they were found, the night that Paul and Tommy were recovered, and Captain Yee called us over. We were down. I was actually on patrol. We were in the truck that night, and Captain Yee called the truck and said, "You guys need to get down here forthwith. with Truck Adam Boy, and we were like, "What's going on?" He goes, "You got to get down here." So we kind of assumed what it was about. We started making phone calls. We called Steph. We called Sergeant Hargrove. We made a lot of notifications that we're heading down to the site. And Mike Elias was with us, Jimmy McCormick, my partner Scott Roberts, Dan Sheridan, Mike Fink, and we drove down to the site, and it was like they were just waiting for us, and they were all lined up, and they were like, 10 truck, we need you guys to go dig over by that grappler. And we started digging, and then Captain Yee said, listen, guys, come down. We already recovered what we believe we found of Tommy and Paul, and they were already in stoke baskets, and everyone just lined up, and we carried them out, and it was pretty bad. Joe Esposito was there. We had the chief of department walk us out, and we gave him the lead, and we all carried him out, and we put them into the back of the department bus. I'm sorry, we put them into the back of 10 truck, and Billy Simpson was the chauffeur that came down, and Billy was one of the senior guys, and Billy says to me, he goes, "Vinny, I can't drive." He goes, "You got to drive." And I drove the truck, and we drove all the way to Bellevue, and everyone walked behind us to Bellevue. And I will never, ever forget that. And my partner, Scott, stood in the back doors with the doors open. We wouldn't close the back doors. And we got to Bellevue, and again, the same thing at Bellevue. And the CO, Ronnie Rassa was there. And we carried our 2 fallen guys in. We brought them into Bellevue. That was a hell of a night.
Oh, yeah. And you mentioned Joe Esposito and Joe Dunn earlier as well. I mean, 2 guys, they were real cops, let me tell you. Those guys were real cops. Didn't matter how high they went up in the ranks. Joe Dunn finished up as first deputy commissioner. Esposito was the longest tenured chief of department. But those 2 guys, they never, ever forgot where they came from. So I'm glad you mentioned them. And at least, listen, in a situation like this, you would have rather a miracle recovery if they survived it. But if it had to be those type of circumstances where they didn't make it, at least you got to bring them home. At least.
Yep.
So thanks for doing that.
No problem.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a question that was in the chat earlier. I wanted to get to because I didn't want to forget about it. It comes from John Costello. And in reference to 5 truck back when it was Hezzy, he says, did Hezzy assigned highway cops go through the STS?
No, they did not. They would just drive the ESU trucks to the location that the ESU guys were requesting.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that makes sense. I didn't think they did, but that's a good question, so I wanted to make sure.
The one thing that Highway 5 did have, they had Hearst tools. They had station wagons with the Paladin tool in the back. It was a combo tool. It was a spreader cutter that they had in the back of the cars. That they did have.
Yeah, I heard about that because there was a guy that he was mentioned in, I think, one of Sam Katz's books, that he was a really, really distinguished highway cop, and guys kept telling him, because he would carry that type of equipment in the back of his car, when are you going to come to ESU? Because he was so skilled at using it. He's like, just come to ESU. So they kept prodding him. I don't know if he ever did. I forget his name.
And Mike, I do believe that our STS class, was the first class that Truck 5 put guys into. I could be wrong. I'm not 100% sure. I might have to ask Steph if he chats.
He says Truck 5 came in. Let me highlight the comment here so everybody can see who's watching. He says Truck 5 came into the ESU directly after 9/11.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Maybe one of the first. Yeah. So that would make sense. That would make sense.
Because I think they were I was the first class that we had Truck 5 ESU 5 guys with us in STS.
And let me tell you, people kind of sleep on Staten Island, and people always make jokes about the borough. But listen, they do work out there. It may not be the same work as Manhattan, but man, 5 trucks a busy place too.
Yeah, it's busy.
A lot of good jobs out there, a lot of good people that have worked there. Now, a month later, we have, of course, a cool moment for you, as you were telling me off the air about. Now, I haven't heard the full story yet, but the Yankees make another World Series. Back in the day when the Yankees used to actually, be successful, and they're trying to win 5 championships in 6 years. They're coming off the 3-peat. It's an emotional time. And they're playing the Arizona Diamondbacks. Now, they lose the first 2 out in Arizona because Johnson and Schilling dominate. They come back for 3 epic games in 3, 4, and 5. You have a signed baseball from the entire 2001 Arizona Diamondbacks. Tell me about it.
So my partner, Scott Roberts, and myself was signed to Yankee Stadium. We were interior response. and we were assigned to home plate and first base. The mayor, Rudy Giuliani, was sitting directly behind the dugout. So me and my partner get a radio. Our radios go off, and they go, the mayor just got a threat. They were going to throw a hand grenade at him, apparently by a drone or somewhere. I can't remember how it was. And they wanted to move him down closer to the dugout. So they asked me and my partner, they said, listen, can you guys go in the dugout? We had long guns and stuff. And we're like, go in the dugout. They're like, yep, go sit in the dugout. So me and my partner were like, okay. We walk in the dugout, and Joe Torre is there. Is it Don Zimmerman?
Don
Zimmerman. Sean O'Neill. Was Derek Jeter there?
Paul O'Neill.
Paul O'Neill. That's it. Paul O'Neill. And we sat down, and I was sitting next to Don Zimmer on the bench. And me and my partner were like, this is great. This is great. We're sitting there, and Joe Torre shook our hand. Officers, how are you? And we're like, yeah, we're here. We're here for the mayor. Yeah, we're just hanging out because he got a threat. And it was like, holy cow. But the ball we got the next day at Ground Zero, we were at the Barkley base, and the entire Arizona Diamondback team was invited down to Ground Zero, and they were at the Barkley base where we had our staging area. And my partner Scott says to me, he goes, wow, my best friend's son has got brain cancer, and he's a huge Arizona Diamondback fan. I wonder if we can get a ball. I said, Scott, let's ask. If they say no, they say no. So we went back inside and we asked, and the guys go, yeah, no problem. And they took 3 balls and they passed it all around and 3 hats, and they passed it all around. They go, here, guys. And so Scott's like, I only need 1 ball and 1 hat. I said, all right. I said, I guess the other hat and ball is ours. And we put it in the van, and Scott gave it to the kid, and they won the World Series. I don't know. I know the kid was doing well at that time. I don't know what the outcome was, so I don't want to, God forbid, talk about it. But, yeah, I got a full ball and a full hat signed by the entire team. It was unbelievable.
Yeah. And as we were talking about, not to go down a whole baseball rabbit hole, although I could, being the big baseball fan that I am, in hindsight, for any Yankee fans that remember that World Series, yes, it was a painful loss, but that Diamondbacks team was a heck of a team. A lot of great players on it. Looking back through the roster over the years, Mark Grace at the end of his career, still an effective player. They had Craig Counsell.
What was the pitcher? What was his name? He was huge.
Randy Johnson.
Yes.
6'10". Big
I'm
unit.
6'2", and I was like, wow, looking up to him. I was like, wow.
And he was a fireballer.
That was
ended
amazing.
up coming to the Yankees years later. But yeah, Randy Johnson, he was something. Luis Gonzalez, Steve Finley, great team.
Yep.
Great team. Now, I have to ask you about this too, because this is another notable detail that you guys have in ESU, particularly if you're in 9 truck or 10 truck. When the US Open comes around, that's a busy time. And it's hot too, because it's right at the tail end of the summer dog days. What do you remember most from working that? Because it's August, it's sweltering, a lot of people, fun event. What do you recall?
I recall being the chef. We used to cook for the guys. We try to keep everybody together and don't have guys leave the venue. It was really hard for guys to get out and get food and get back on time, and a lot of the bosses were getting pissed off that guys were missing. You're dealing with the biggest revenue maker for New York City, and there's millions and millions of people there and hundreds of thousands of vehicles, and the guys weren't coming back. So we decided, why don't we just start barbecuing here? And hence I became the lead chef. And I kind of coordinated every year. And, especially the big bosses, they liked having everybody there. We weren't losing our guys. Everyone was there and accounted for. But it was a great detail. It really was. It was nice seeing, the stadium reopened and all the flowers put in. And it was a good time. It was hot, but it was a good time.
How do you cook your steak?
Medium rare.
Fair enough. I'm a well done guy, but I don't judge. Listen. And as you said, not only are the bosses satisfied because everybody's together, but they get a great meal out of it. So it's a double win. You can't go wrong. You can't go wrong. And I got to ask this too. And you can't say 9 truck because it's right in your borough. You get to fly a lot in ESU. So you get to see how different trucks operate, what the common jobs are, kind of like what we talked about with 5 truck earlier, and
Yep.
get a sense of how they do things and collaborate with fellow E-men and E-women in different trucks and get to know them. So besides 9, what other trucks did you especially enjoy flying to?
I enjoyed truck 3, went to truck 4 a lot, and truck 2.
Yeah, a lot of people say those Bronx trucks. I'm glad to see those
Yeah.
Bronx trucks get love, man, because they deserve it. They're getting down.
The Bronx trucks were very busy.
Uh-huh. And 2 truck too. Two truck gets a lot of love as well, which I enjoy. It's one of my favorite trucks. I love them all equally. So for those of you that work in the other trucks, don't accuse me. I love them all equally, but I'm glad to see those specific trucks get their love for sure. So here comes October of 2008, and the exact date is October 2nd when you make the move. But nevertheless, it's tough to leave emergency. If you're going to leave emergency, it better be for something good, and this was good. But nevertheless, when the opportunity to go to the JTTF comes up and you're mulling it, on one hand, you got a great gig. But on the other hand, here's a great opportunity. It's the ultimate tug of war. It's a good problem to have. What made you ultimately decide, you know what, I'm going to go to the JTTF, even though it's going to kill me to leave ESU?
There was a big change in emergency service. We had Chief Gianelli, who unfortunately is deceased. He started to cause a lot of problems in emergency, where he wouldn't let us make entry on jobs anymore, and we needed the bishop's approval to make entry on these jobs. We'd be on barricades, and we would not be allowed to make entry. And you'd hear the guy is stabbing his wife or whatever he's doing inside, or EDP or perp job, and we're like, we got to go in, and we weren't allowed to go in, and it just it kind of hurt being in emergency and being that trained officer that normally made entry, and why can't we go in? And this just came up. Chief Waters was the CO. He was a CO. Inspector Waters was the CO to 109. He became the CO JTTF. And
Good man.
Great guy. And offered me a spot. And it was time. I just felt the time to go.
Yeah. I think I remember Steve Lanos telling me when he was on a few months back that, an old timer in ESU told him, hey, kid, bounce around, try to move on to different places. Listen, if you like where you are and you don't have to change it, don't. But if you can bounce around, in his case, you went to the bomb squad, then, you do. And you go over to JTTF in 2008. And now here's an interesting spot where by this point, you got about 15 years on the job. But you're going from a hands-on, mechanical, tactical approach in emergency to now more of an investigative one in JTTF. So even though it has an ESU component, like we were talking about off the air, Mike Core and Patty Bogan started that trend. Tell me about having to kind of reprogram your mind as a cop at this stage in your career.
Well, being that you're going to a unit that's a very big investigative unit, I had to kind of step back, and it was almost like being a brand new guy in emergency service again. And just listening and learning. And one thing that was done right by me is Chief Waters told me, he said, listen, I want you to go into my response squad, which was CT 26. It was Counterterrorism 26. And that was more of like the 9/11 response squad. Whatever was hopping on in the city, that was the response team that would go. He's like, listen, Vinny, you're slated for the hazmat squad. I know that, but I want you to get your feet wet first in this team. Learn how the FBI operates, and then go from there to your WMD squad. And that was a smart move on his part. I wasn't happy about it, but it was a smart move. It made me learn how the FBI operates. I learned all the FBI paperwork. I learned FBI policy and procedure. And I was linked up with a couple of senior guys in the task force, and I gave my tactical experience, and they gave me their investigative experience. So it was pretty cool. We go on interviews, and they'd be like, hey, Vinny, what would you do in this situation? I'd be like, listen, let's back off a little bit. Let's stand off a bit. And we had a couple of crazy, you're responding to jobs, and you're responding to Interpol investigations. You're responding to leads coming from overseas. You're responding to and answering leads coming from the CIA overseas. They want you to talk to certain people and interview certain people. So it really worked out really well being on that squad.
I can imagine. And the good thing about it, as I've covered before with JTTF guys, is that Ray Kelly was so invested in it that
Yeah.
whatever you guys needed to do, you had the police commissioner's approval almost in advance to go out there and do it. Very rarely would he say no. And David Cohen's a former CIA guy, so his contacts with the CIA, whatever you need on that front, he can get you. So really, that's around the time, and this has kind of always been the case, but especially after 9/11 and throughout the 2000s and even to this day. That's why people call the NYPD the world police. You got tentacles everywhere. As a result, you can do the kind of things most police departments in the country, no matter how big they are, just can't do. Some things that can be discussed, some things that can't, but nevertheless, a lot of cool things.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of cool things. So, here's the thing about early on in JTTF. There was an explosion in 2008, very minor one. It happened kind of at a time when nobody's really walking the streets. It was around the time of the presidential campaign cycle, so there was attention paid to it. Nothing happened there. 2 years later is when something almost happened, and that was, of course, 2010 with the Times Square plot. Truck starts smoking. Thankfully, this idiot didn't put the device together correctly. So here's the first big moment for you, and I'm sure there were others, but the first big moment that directly impacts New York, that makes national headlines. And you had about a year or two in the JTTF. If you had a hand in that, tell me about it.
I was working a Saturday. That was a Saturday we were doing a 4 to 12, and I was the first member of JTTF on scene with that. And the one thing that stands out on that job is having Times Square evacuated and actually able to hear the ticker going around on the building. That's how quiet it was. But that job was a real deal. That guy, luckily, he did not know what he was doing. And my partner at the time, he responded with me also, and we found out about the Connecticut plates, and right away sent it to Connecticut, and the investigation started. And it just took off from there. It was really an eye opener, being like closely involved with that. And it was great having the ESU bond and having the ESU background because, you were first in with that. You were in with the ESU guys, in with the bomb squad guys, and you got first-hand information. And my boss is like that because, you're not hearing hearsay from other people. You're hearing exactly what's going on, real time.
Oh, yeah, especially in a situation like that where Cohen wanted to be briefed right then and there, as did Kelly. You need to have that, and that was a great effort that night. And the guy that I wish I could talk to, but I'll never be able to, sadly, about that job is Greg Abate. He, again, former E-Man, went to the Bomb Squad 2006. He had that job. It was one of the last jobs he worked before he retired. And fortunately, we lost Greg to a heart attack back in 2013. But again, another guy did a great job. And you see that emergency imprint right then and there. So,
I knew Greg very well. Yeah.
Yep. Wasn't he a K9 guy in ESU too?
Yep. Yep.
He did everything. What I wouldn't have given to be able to talk to him. Unfortunately, like I said, I'll never be able to, but he's not forgotten now. The WMD hazmat component is interesting. ESU does have that, of course, and it's expanded a lot over the years. You also have a decon team in emergency service as well, and here it is in the JTTF. So I guess it would make sense that they would look to you. You had 9 years in ESU. You had some familiarity with it. Now that familiarity gets to expand, and you're the first guy that wasn't in the FBI to have that responsibility. How long was it before they approached you about it? And what exactly, without getting to the classified stuff, does that responsibility entail?
I was transferred from the response squad to the WMD squad, which was called CT-22, Counterterrorism 22. And it was comprised of the WMD unit, the hazmat unit, and the SABTs, which are the Special Agent Bomb Techs. And we worked very closely with emergency service, the bomb squad, ATF, DEP. So that's the squad that I was on. We had a fire marshal, a DEP, a detective, Amtrak police, MTA police, Port Authority police. And we also, who else do we have? I'm drawing a blank. But we worked very well with the emergency service and the fire department. Did a lot with the fire department too. A lot of briefings with the fire department. But it was a good time. I learned a lot. And my background, they took me right away onto the hazmat team. There was no classing, nothing. Right away, went down to Virginia, went through their training on their protocols, and I knew what I was doing. And believe it or not, the FBI looks up big time to the NYPD Emergency Service Unit. big time. We were very well respected down there. Yep, very well.
It's good to see for sure, because you always hear about the beefs, and I think it's more so the higher ups that have had the run-ins with each other over the years. But on the ground level, for the most part, you're going to have the knucklehead here and there on both sides. But for the most part, everybody gets along.
Definitely.
Yeah, everybody gets along. And let me tell you, the FDNY hazmat side, much respected them. I got a few friends that work there. They're housed, for those of you that don't know, and most of you do in the chat, but for those that don't, they're housed in the Special Operations Command section of the FDNY, but specifically their quarters is with Squad 288 in Queens and Maspeth. Great big rig, a lot of equipment on it. What those guys do, man, big ups to them, man, because it takes a lot. It's a lot of heart to be able to be in a unit like hazmat. So major props to them, and on the ESU side too. So, eventually you got to be a team leader, and we'll get to some notable jobs you worked before your retirement in a second. But as a team leader, there's bigger responsibility because there's that trust factor where people on your team, no matter how much time they have, to an extent, they're looking at you for the answers, and they're looking at you for the final decision on what's going to be done or even what's not going to be done. So tell me about taking on that responsibility and how you molded yourself to make sure you were an effective team leader.
Well, going back and being, hazmat certified through the NYPD and having all the, the training and stuff, I got right into becoming, at the time it was HMRT. It was a hazardous materials response team. And they needed to have experienced people be assistant team leaders. And I tried out for it, and I actually got it. I interviewed for it. I got it through the team. The team leader at the time was Dwayne Keisman. He was a team leader, and there were 3 alternate team leaders. And a lot of times, Dwayne would do a lot of overseas travel and some stuff I can't talk about, and he would disappear for a couple of months, and I would be acting team leader. And my supervisor on the FBI side said, listen, Vinny, we can't officially make you the hazmat team leader because it has to be an FBI agent. He said, but you're running the team. It's your team. You do what you want with it. It's a 28-member team. And I really, it was a huge accomplishment for an NYPD detective to become a team leader at New York's FBI team, which was one of the biggest in the country. We were almost bigger than Washington, D.C. And we responded to a lot of jobs. I had a really great team. I had great guys, great team leaders, assistant team leaders. I can't say enough about it. I had a really, really good time, and we had a lot of big, newsworthy jobs.
Oh, I'll say. And here's the first one, 2016. Here's a guy that he kind of unfortunately did know what he was doing because the bomb did go off. It didn't cause the damage he wanted it to cause, and thank goodness for that. But it did go off, and I don't remember his name, and who cares anyway? He's a terrorist. But it detonated over in Chelsea, busy neighborhood. And, by miracle, on this particular Saturday night, which is a late summer night, September's still pretty warm in the city, didn't have a lot of people on the street. Some injuries, but ultimately minor. But nevertheless, it goes off, and there had been the device in Seaside Heights, New Jersey as well. That case, from your vantage point, where you still don't know if he has other devices on the loose, and you don't even know who he is quite yet in the initial stages. Tell me about that.
I was off. It was a Saturday. I was off. I was actually at a friend's house at a barbecue. My cell phone went off, and a former JTTF member who was retired, his name was Patty McGow, and he calls me, and I look at my phone, and I go, this can't be good. And he goes, hey, I guess you don't know. I said, no what? He goes, a bomb went off in Manhattan. I was like, oh, boy, here we go. And now my department phone started ringing. I left my friends. I went home. I got dressed. I flew into Manhattan and got to 23rd and 6th and saw the scene, saw the chaos. I saw that Lincoln town car that was in the middle of the road that was shredded, that I believe there was a driver. It was a TLC vehicle. It was a driver and 2 occupants in that vehicle. Vehicle was shredded, and there was a garbage dumpster embedded in a building. It was in about the 3rd or 4th floor of the building. I looked up and I saw that, and I was like, holy shit, this is the real deal. This is a real explosion. This is the real deal. So I set up base camp. I started calling in my resources. I had Quantico on the phone. They were spinning up their assets. It was a big deal. They wanted to know what we needed. They were going to start sending Black Hawks down if we had any, chemical signature to it. I remember the CO of JTTF was Joe Herbert. He was the guy that figured out the Zodiac killer.
I was
in
going to say, yep,
75.
another great guy, legend.
He was the CO, and I remember seeing him running around, and I grabbed him and I said, Chief, I said, you got to stop walking around. I said, boss, I said, this is a live scene. And at that point, my phone had just gone off, and they told me they found a second device, a live device, 2 blocks away. We were on 23rd, and I believe it was on 27th, so it was 4 blocks away. I'm sorry. And I said, Chief, I said, you got to stop walking around. I said, this is an unsecured area. Until this area is secured, excuse me, I said, stop walking around. All the resources started coming in, and we spoke about the way the investigation was going to happen. We made it a joint investigation between the FBI and the NYPD. Crime scene merged with my hazardous evidence response team, and it went great. There were no issues. There was no one arguing. There was no butting heads. You know, the bomb techs were there with the bomb squad, and everything went like clockwork. It was really good. I think we had that scene processed in less than 24 hours.
Yep,
that's how quick it was done.
Mm-hmm. I remember Paulie telling me that. And the thing that Paulie mentioned too when he was on last year to recall that case is that at this time, it's not just the bomb squad. You guys in JTTF were pretty darn busy too, because it's, at the time of the year, UNGA's going on. You got that. Yep. You had just come off the U.S. Open the month prior. This is during that busy, brutal gauntlet of a stretch from August to December where you don't get a break because you're going from that to UNGA, to the Halloween parade, to the Thanksgiving parade, to, of course, the New York City Marathon, and New Year's Eve festivities, Rockefeller Center, the whole 9 yards. So then to have that thrown in there, it was a big case. It took you guys, what? He ended up getting found in Jersey because he got into a shootout with the Linden police officers who shot and wounded him. That was what?
Yes.
2 or 3 days later?
I would say 2 or 3 days. Yeah. Also had the post-blast scene in Elizabeth where he dumped his cache of pipe bombs up in that train platform. That was another crime scene.
Mm-hmm. That guy, man, he was out for blood, and thankfully he didn't succeed. Yep. And here's somebody, unfortunately, who did succeed. And I remember this like it was yesterday. I mean, this was October of 2017, and at that time, I remember the Yankees were in the ALCS against Houston. This is the first time they met in the postseason, and I'm thinking about that, and all of a sudden I see this breaking news. I throw on Channel 2, and it's the West Side, right by the Trade Center, ironically, where this animal gets that truck from Jersey, comes down, and mows down these people who are just trying to enjoy a late fall day in the city, and kills 8 of them, tragically. And here you are for that case where the weapon isn't an explosive device. It's a truck. It's an everyday thing that most people use to get around. Get like that where you have one weapon there, the truck. You don't know what else he has. He's been taken into custody at this point, so at least you know who he is. What was that scene like?
That day was funny. I was with John Kenny. John Kenny was another emergency guy that came over to JTTF, and John was there maybe for a year, just about. And I told John, I said, let's go outside. It's gorgeous. I want to smoke a cigar, and I want to have a cup of coffee. We were in Chelsea in the office. He said, all right, let's go. We went out front. We grabbed our radios, put our radios on our pants belt, and we're sitting out front, and we heard the job unfold. And my vehicle was parked on 10th Avenue in front of the building. We jumped in my vehicle. I turned the lights on. I pulled the U-turn on 10th Avenue, went kind of flow on traffic. We flew down the West Side Highway, and we just saw the carnage. You just saw body parts. People were hovering over, just like just jumbled bodies. And we just flew down to where we heard they were screaming on the radio. Now they're screaming shots fired, and we were getting ready. We were getting ready to engage this guy, and I had pulled up, and you saw where the truck just hit the school bus. There were kids trapped in the school bus, and we saw the cops engaging him, and the perp was down. And we ran up to this, and myself and John Kenny, EMS was there. EMS pulled up. They grabbed him. I told John, I said, John, you secure the scene. I'm going to the hospital. I'm going to print this guy. We're going to find out who this guy is. So John had all of his clothes. John had his cell phone. He went to the hospital. I diverted. I went to 26 Federal Plaza, and we had a machine that was able to print you, do a Oculus scan, and send off and find out who you were. I can't say the name of it. I'm not allowed to say the name of it, but
That's fine.
I grabbed it. I went to the hospital. I walked right into the ER. All the big bosses were there. Commissioner Miller was there. John Miller was there. There was a couple of big chiefs from the squads. They saw. They knew me. They knew me from big jobs. So I walked in with the briefcase, and I walked right into the operating room. And the doctor was sewing him up, and he's like, "You can't be in here." I said, "Doc, calm down. I'm going to be in here. I got to print this guy." And we got into a little bit of a heated argument. I told him, I said, "Doc, I said, I'm telling you right now, if you got a problem, you're going to have a serious issue with this." I said, "You take care of the patient. I got to print him." They finished sewing him up. We wheeled him out. I started to print him, and the prints weren't coming back for some reason. This was basically a portable live scan machine. So I printed him. I transmitted the prints. I had a Taru guy there helping me. We took his ocular scan. It still wasn't coming back. I did it 3 times. So now I got on the phone. I called up because our jock was activated. And I called up my boss. I said, "Hey, Lou, it's Vinny." I said, "We got a problem. This guy is not coming back. I'm not getting any hits on this guy." So I called up One Police Plaza. And I had latent prints in my car. I kept a latent print kit in my car for major case prints. So I ran back upstairs. I grabbed my bag. I got my latent print, my major case prints, and I actually printed this guy old school with ink in the operating room. I'm printing this guy in the operating room. I grab the prints. I get back in my vehicle. I fly down to One Police Plaza. They're waiting for me. We go upstairs, and within an hour and a half later, we had this guy ID'd. I now shoot back to the scene. We get back to the scene. It's hectic, complete chaos. We got back to the scene. We figured out who this guy was. The investigation started, and now it starts to slow down. And now we start to figure out. We see he has his ISIS flag on the front seat. He has his backpack, and now we start to figure out. Okay, this is definitely terrorism. And the next morning, obviously, the scene was handed off to us. We're the hazardous evidence response team, and we started to process the scene. We had to cut the rounds out of the tree for where the cop shot. We had to process the car. There was a lot to do. It was a lot. But emergency service and the JTTF members, everyone worked hands down. NYPD crime scene, everyone worked. No issues, no complaints. Like a fine oil machine.
I'll say, and again, it's just a tragic job. I think there was a group of friends visiting from Spain. They were just biking along the trail when they were mowed down, which, and I believe the attacker was recently sentenced to life without parole, which
yes,
it's somewhat of a solace. But thing that I recall too, someone saying a while ago, is that it could have been anybody. It could have been any one of us. She's a New Yorker that posted this, a friend of mine. And it's true. Imagine you're just going about your day, walking down a beautiful day like that.
Gorgeous day. It was gorgeous that day.
Yeah. And I think there was a case, and it wasn't terrorism too. And this is why it's important to look into these incidents where I think the year before 2016, some guy, he wasn't a terrorist. He had psychological issues, jumped the curb in Times Square and mowed down some people.
Yes.
So, it sounds crazy, but within the investigative context, it's not always terrorism, which is why when people say, well, of course it's terrorism, you have to investigate it to be sure. Because sometimes, as in that case, it could just be somebody who's off their rocker. But in this case, not only was the guy off his rocker, he was a terrorist.
Yep.
So, at least there was some form of solace, like I said, in the end with him getting sentenced. Now, speaking of people who are off the rocker, 2018, and it's not funny in the sense that if these could have gone off, they would have done a lot of damage and hurt and killed people potentially. But the guy was just such a whack job. So I'm talking about Cesar Sayoc. Here's a guy that lives out of a van. He's like a classic loser character you see in a comedy movie, lives in a van, like Chris Farley, in a van down by the river. But in this van, there's pipe bombs, and he's sending them around to different people he doesn't care for, namely Robert De Niro, the Clintons. I think one was sent to an office in Manhattan, amongst others. And it's not the work of a sophisticated terrorist, but just somebody, like I said, that's off their rocker. Here's a very, very unique character, to say the least, and I don't say that lovingly. So tell me about investigating one Cesar Sayoc and his rather unique trail of pipe bombs he left around New York.
It was interesting. The first one was sent to Soros's house, upstate New York.
That's right. Yep.
That was number one. We got the phone call for that. The team responded up there, and it was a beautiful area. And our bomb techs responded, and they actually rendered it safe. They actually disrupted it. They blew it up. It was immediately dismantled and sent to Quantico, and that was a no sleep week. Let's put it that way. That was a pure caffeine week. Left that job, heading home. Got home and got called out again, and I believe we had 2 at CNN, 1 at De Niro's house, 1 at the Clinton residence, and a couple were seized at the postal facility. We put a hold on that type of label. We were able to put a seizure order on the actual envelopes, how they looked. So all the cameras that the mail will be processed through, they would hold that mail. We got, I believe, two were detained at the Rockefeller Center postal facility, but it was nonstop. It was nonstop, and I actually had to suit up for one at the CNN building. I had to go down into the mailroom and suit up. That was interesting too.
This was like it was a twisted three-peat, to say the least, of really terrible but high-profile incidents where you go from Chelsea to the truck attack to this. Forgetting no sleep week. That was no sleep years from 2016 to 2018, because they're all in a short amount of time, and you normally don't see that now. There's stuff that happens that the public doesn't know about. And it's not that you guys are hiding things, but at the same time, you don't want to create alarm. It's kind of like screaming fire in a crowded theater. But some of these things are going to make headlines. So to have it happen that consecutively, across that 3-year stretch, man, again, great work, because it couldn't have been easy. It takes its toll on you mentally. Forget physically. Mentally, it's exhausting to look into these cases.
Well, that was Commissioner O'Neill's 2 big jobs, because the Chelsea bombing, I think Commissioner O'Neill was commissioner for, I think, 6 hours.
Yep. Bratton had just left. You're right.
Yep. Yep. And I remember being at CNN, and O'Neill walked up, and I had my my FBI vehicle. I had a black Expedition, and I was parked in front, and he wanted a briefing. And I always avoided the brass. I never liked to be in with the brass. I always wanted to be the worker bee. And he called for a briefing, and I turned around, and he goes, No. He goes, come over here. He goes, I want a briefing from you. And I started the brief, and Chief Waters was standing next to me, and I was nervous. You're talking to a commissioner. And John Miller was there, and I had my earpiece on my radio, and I hear this guy Billy Daly from Emergency. Billy's another great guy. He should be going to JTTF soon, hopefully. He's a WMD guy. He's one of the instructors. And Billy goes to me. He goes, Vin, we found white powder. And I'm like, oh no! So we have a pipe bomb, and we have white powder. So I'm like, Chief, I gotta go. He's like, no, you stay here. You gotta brief. I'm like, Chief, we have white powder downstairs now. I gotta go. So Chief Waters told Commissioner O'Neill, he goes, my guys gotta go. And I left, and I met my partner, Brian Rawson from the FBI, and we drove our vehicles down, and I had to suit up. I had to go in there, and it was interesting. It was very interesting.
I'll say. There's a funny story about that. So I'm reading Bill Bratton's book. I'm just about done with it, The Profession, his latest book. And he talks about that, how he had just left when that happened. And O'Neill joked to John Miller, it was probably Bratton, and they said, hey, it was, they saw a guy resembling Bratton in that area walking away, but they knew it couldn't be him. And O'Neill says to Miller, why? Why couldn't it have been Bill Bratton? And Miller shoots back, because Bill Bratton would never walk away from the camera. So
Commissioner Miller, he's phenomenal. I love him.
Yeah,
I got along with him so well. At every job, he would come up to me and go, what do we have, Vincenzo? Every job.
Yeah, no, he's great. He was my 100th guest a couple of years ago. We stay in touch, and I met him. Flying Aces, of course, Andy Burchad's company. He does a lot of speaking with them, and I saw him down in City. And again, here's a guy that a lot of people kind of underrated, because he's replacing David Cohen. And people thought, well, what could he know about counterterrorism? A lot. Remember, this is a man that interviewed Osama bin Laden before anybody in the American public knew who he was, face to face. Or as you guys say in the Italian dialect, faccia a faccia. He knows.
Yeah, if I had to pick someone between Cohen and Miller, 100% John Miller. 100%.
Yeah, me too. And that's no disrespect to Cohen, but Miller knows his stuff. He's plugged in, because remember, he's got the media contacts too.
Yep.
Dual threat.
100%. 100%.
Good man, John Miller. So I talked about it earlier. These investigations, they're rewarding in the sense that, okay, you find the perp, you get him off the street, He gets tried, he gets convicted, or you're even able to stop attacks, which a lot has been done to stop attacks since 9/11 in New York. So that part of it's good. But eventually you reach a point where you have enough. COVID didn't help matters because everyone went nuts during that period. And then in 2021, fairly recently, you said, all right, 27 years, time to go. Even without the pandemic and everything else, when did you start thinking, you know what, maybe I should start winding down?
Just to reflect back on one thing before I answer that.
Yeah, no problem.
In the JTTF, there was so many jobs that the media didn't know about, the public didn't know about, that there's such great work done with the emergency service guys involved, with the ATF guys involved. You just got to give kudos to them that we did so many things that we could not talk about, that no one knew about, that things were going on. And I have to say that was one great thing about working with the JTTF. Stuff that my wife doesn't even know, my kids don't know, my family doesn't know. I still won't even tell them. It's just amazing the stuff that we did. But that was one very big, great thing I loved about JTTF.
Absolutely. And 3 words to you: write the book.
Yeah.
Write the book.
Yeah.
I'll buy it. I'll ghost
Yeah.
write it for you. Write the book. You have to write the book.
The stories, forget it. But talking about leaving, I just got really kind of depressed with all the anti-police stuff going on with the the fire bombings, the riots, the BLM, the anti-police stuff. It just really got to me. It just really got to me. And my wife is like, Vin, what are you doing? And I'm like, I was in a great spot. I'm not on patrol. I felt bad for the patrol guys. And COVID hit, and I actually got transferred. I took a transfer to the airport, and I went to JFK for 2 years, and that was really phenomenal. That was a good time doing that with the JTTF, handling all investigations involving the airlines, and a bunch of great guys there also. And I just woke up one morning, and I was having a call from my wife, and I said, babe, I'm done. She goes, excuse me? I said, I'm done. I said, I'm going in today, and I'm going to call a pension section. And it was nice because it was streamlined from COVID. You didn't have to go anywhere. You didn't have to hop from the pension section to one police plaza, back to here, back to there. I walked into the airport, and my boss, my FBI supervisor, was Mike Reagan, great guy. And I said, Mike, I go, I'm done. He goes, excuse me? I said, Mike, I'm retiring. He goes, no, you're not. He goes, I can't. No, you're not. I said, boss, I'm done. And he just tapped his head and he goes, oh my God. And that was it. I was done. I called up and I retired. I was done. I miss it. I miss the clowns. I don't miss the circus. I really don't.
Everyone tells me that. Yep.
Yeah.
Everyone tells me that.
It really was, almost 28. Well, around my time of 28 years. It was 28 years of having the best seat to the greatest show on earth and working with some of the best heroes in my life, standing around people that you look up to. And one being, Mr. Stephanakis there,
I think he's still in the chat. He hasn't put anything in the while, but I know he's probably listening. If he's working tonight.
He's being very nice.
Yeah. Yeah, but Steve's always wanted to contribute, and I appreciate that. He's good to me, friend of yours, friend of mine, friend of everybody's. And the last of the housing rescue guys still on the job. And it's a good point, because again, you just reach a point, but it's nice to at least have that, right? Where you tell somebody you're going to retire, it's like, okay, goodbye. Some people can't wait for certain people to leave, but if you had your boss going, oh no, please don't, it's got to be a good feeling. It means that you meant something.
And I thought I was going to have a serious problem. I really thought I was going to really miss it, but I think COVID helped. That was the one thing for me that I got COVID twice, and I think COVID really helped. It kind of mellowed me out, and I just was able to walk away. I really miss it. I really miss the guys. I really do. I miss that, that ball breaking. I miss it. I miss it so much.
I can imagine. Well, what are you up to now to fill the time? Just chilling out?
I'm doing security. I'm working with Allen Universal. I'm a client manager. I have a bunch of accounts. I can't stay home. I'm too young. I'll go nuts.
I don't blame you. I'm the same way. I need to be busy. I need to be busy. Believe me, I understand you there. You're preaching to the choir with me.
I cover Long Island. I have my partner Mike Franco. He's a retired lieutenant from Nassau County, and we run all over Long Island, and we like it.
Good.
It's good. It keeps me occupied.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, you got that NYPD pension kicking in too. Yeah. Life is
Yep.
good for Mr. Manco. You earned
Yep.
it.
Thank God. Yep.
Yep.
With twin boys in college. Yeah. Yep.
I understand. And they're seniors now, I imagine, right? You mentioned they're 21.
Yeah, the 21. Yep.
Yep. So, listen, a little bit more. You know, you got to what, May?
Yeah. Till May. Yeah.
So, May. So it's a little bit more. Then, those payments, hopefully, at that point, they'll see.
2 cars. Yep.
Yeah.
It just never ends. Yeah.
That's why. And listen, I understand it a little bit now, being older. When my mom, especially after I got my first car, she's like, "You're going to do all this stuff now." And I finally understood why she was grumpy sometimes. And I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah. Adulting is not at all it's cracked up to be. I want to go back to watching SpongeBob and eating cookies."
But Mike, I wouldn't change it for the world. I wouldn't change my wife, my job, my kids, or my coworkers. I wouldn't.
Well, why would you? You had a heck of a run, and I'm glad that we were able to chronicle it tonight. And now it's time for me to put you on the hot seat. You're not off the hook. It's the rapid fire, baby. 5 hit run questions from me, 5 hit run answers from you. I know you're not ready, but I'm going to ask it. But I will say,
phone a friend?
You can say pass if you want. First, best advice anyone ever gave you.
Best advice anyone ever gave me. That's a good one. Best advice was when I was a new guy in emergency and I was told to shut my mouth and just listen.
There you go.
That was the best advice.
Yeah, it's something that applies to a lot of different jobs, not just the NYPD and certainly not just ESU. Second, let's say the NYPD never happened. Let's say you never came on the police department. What's another career you could have seen yourself pursuing and enjoying?
Definitely a porn star, 100%. No, I'm kidding. I was a mechanic prior to becoming a cop. I worked for a Buick dealership, and I still love cars. I guess I probably went into the automotive business. Definitely.
Not a bad business. Not a bad business. When you have a rare moment of downtime and you're not doing security and you're not doing anything, you're just kicking your feet up and relaxing. What's your favorite thing to do during your downtime?
I am right now in my man cave. I smoke cigars down here. I am big into cigars. Still waiting for Joe Guerrero to come over one day and smoke with me. But yeah, cigars, fishing, and hunting are my pastimes.
All right, there you go.
More fishing right now.
Oh, there you go. Hey, listen, is it the season?
Striped bass are big right now. Yeah.
Okay, good, good. All right, fourth, if it were your last day on Earth, what's your final meal of choice?
Oh, my final meal. Wow, you shocked me with this one. I would have to say a good cooked home Italian meal for my wife.
Good answer. Good answer. Mrs. Manco, if you're watching, don't kill him. He said the right thing. And fifth and finally, knowing what you know now, if you can go back in time and give advice to a younger version of yourself, what would the Vince Manco of 2023 tell the Vince Manco of yesteryear? Oh
my God, there's not enough time in the day. Talk about financials, how to save more money, how to I miss my parents. My parents are deceased, but going back, but thank you. Going back to, learning more from my parents, respecting my parents more, not that I didn't, but I did. Just, about life, expectancies. It's basically really it. Yeah.
No, you're right. And I see it now. I'm 23. I'll be 24 in a few months. My mom's 50. And I'm like, I don't want my mom to get old.
She's not old, buddy.
No, not at all. And that's what I'm saying. I'm saying she's young now. I'm like, I don't want 30 years to go by. Like, that's even now. And there's more that I'm independent with. She's taught me a lot. She's taught me well. I'll still call her up and be like, Mom, what do I do here? What's the word? So listen, it never stops.
Mike, cherish your parents, man, because when they're gone,
you
can't fall back and say, hey, remember that? Oh, cool. You know why? They're gone.
Yeah, that's true. I definitely do cherish her. And she did a lot for me and my older sister as a single mom, too. So definitely a lot of love to Mama Colón. This has been great. Stick around. We'll say our goodbyes off the air. Before I say goodbye to my lovely audience here, any shout outs to anyone or anything that you would like to give?
Thank you, everyone, for whoever's chatting. I really can't see it too well, but thanks for whoever's chatting. Thank you for having me on this, Mike. I really appreciate it. I was kind of avoiding it for a while because I really didn't like talking about some jobs. Some jobs bring back some really bad memories, but thank you for letting me be on this. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for making the time. Like I said, it's been a long time trying to get you, so I'm glad that we were able to collaborate. You know, I prodded Jim McVeigh long enough, and I got Jim. I prodded Joe Dolan long enough, and I got him. And I prodded you long enough, and I got you finally. The restraining order kicks in after the show, but I'm glad that we were able to at least get this in before the restraining order kicks in. So thanks a lot.
Great.
And like I said, stick around. We'll talk off the air. Thanks to you guys that tuned in via LinkedIn,
Thank
YouTube, and Twitter. And those of you that are listening to this on audio, I appreciate it as well. Thanks, guys. You're a great audience.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Thank you very much for that, as always. Again, this has been a great year for the show since I came back in June. You guys have really contributed to the growth of the show. We just passed 2,000 subscribers, by the way, on YouTube. So big thank you and much love to you for helping out with that.
That's Patty Pogan just text.
Yes, let's see what Patty said because I'm not seeing it right now. He says, "Good night, Mike and Vinny." Yeah, thanks for watching, Patty. Good man. He was on the show previously last year. So thanks, guys. And for those of you that will watch this later, same thing. Much thanks to you. Much love. Coming up next on the Mike the New Haven podcast, of course, we have a reunion show. It's a transit rescue reunion show for volume 40 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's emergency service unit. They were all members of the New York City Transit Police Emergency Medical Rescue Unit. They came over with the merge. It's going to be Franco Baraducci, who are all returning guests, of course, John Bushing, and Anita Rosato, who will be on, of course, for this reunion show. Hopefully a few other faces too, but those are the three I have confirmed for it. And they'll be on this Tuesday. And next Friday, I've never interviewed a judge before, but I know his daughter very well. She's my mentor, Joelle Gargiulo from Channel 4 in New York. Of course, correspondent for New York Live. Her father, Judge Jerry Gargiulo, who works out in Nassau County as a judge in the appellate division, was a prosecutor formerly. He'll be on. So I interviewed the daughter last year. I'll finally get the father this year to complete the little family tree there. In the meantime, on behalf of Vince Manco, this has been volume 39 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's emergency service unit. I'm Mike Colón. We'll see you next time. Have a great weekend. And as the E-Men like to say, anytime, baby, take care. Good night.
Thank you.